Here's another. See this one here? It's voices, voices in the sky. This book is an old library book from some place in Corpus Christi. It also belonged to a junior high, Tom Brown Junior High. I don't know where that's at, but about this, I think it was Goodwill. I'm not too sure. And this book was written by Don Dwiggins. It's the story of communication satellites. Those of you that are interested in this kind of things. And then it's copyright 1969, just about the time that men were getting ready to land on the moon, or probably already landed, but it's the year 1969 copyright. And it's got the contents are voices in the sky, how communication satellites work, the beginnings, a dream of global communication. Wow. Score, the talking missile, world's first communication satellite. That's in page 19. The low altitude satellites that carry messages. Oh, this is something else. Sitcom, the first synchronous satellite. Man hangs out a new star. Yeah, that's what it is basically. But it's not a new star, it's a satellite. Stars are, they produce their own light by helium, hydrogen, helium. They produce helium and it throws out light, protons. This satellites, they reflect the light from the sun. But they call it here man hangs out a new star instead of man hangs out a new moon. Could have been a little bit better. And then the commercial satellites arrive. They start with their orbiting telephone exchanges. The Russian lightning in the sky, world's first domestic satellite network by Russians. Military communication satellites patrolling worldwide battlefronts. Well, forward and the author's preface by Don Wickens. The world today is a crossroads on which man stands a fair chance of controlling his own destiny. Depending on the path he chooses to follow, his future will be bright, harmonious, or dark with despair. Our fantastic 20th century technology has given mankind awesome power which he must learn to control and direct before drawing fully upon it to serve his needs. Nuclear energy, supersonic flight, long range weather predictions are only a few of today's technological marvels which man is learning to use as modern tools with which to fashion his future. And we're 2026. This is some time ago. How they predicted the future. A lot of it comes true, but some of it is a little exaggerated. Like, there's some books that is from the 50s say man is going to land and have bases on the moon by the year 2000. Well, money is money. In an effort to bring the world closer together in a meaningful way, the late President John F. Kennedy, at the opening of this decade, dedicated nations to achieving a global communication through our newfound space technology. Now, this achievement is at hand. We must decide to utilize this great new tool for learning for the betterment of all mankind. In the words of John M. Mason, an early American theologian, the aim of education should be to convert the mind into a living fountain and not a reservoir. Yeah. That which is filled by merely pumping in will be emptied by pumping out. It is for the youth of America to ensure that with this legacy, our fountain of life continues to flow freely. Yeah. And nowadays, if you look at the space program, Elon Musk, NASA, and many others, and you see, when they show the control rooms where they, take care of all this launching of rockets and satellites and everything else, This people that are running, that are doing on the, they're in front of those computers. This most of them hadn't been born yet, or some of them are just very young. So they came out pretty savvy, and they're the ones that are running all this high technology that at one time was very. I mean, you would talk that if you would be in NASA in the 60s and 50s or whatever, and you were using computers, wow, the public didn't have computers. And anyway, the author is indeed to many friends in government and industry who assist in the compilation of materials on which this book, Voices in the Sky, is based. To list them all would be impractical. However, my individual thanks to go to each one who contributed part of the whole story of space age communication. And communications right now is the main thing there is. Everything, something happens in 1 second. On the other side of the world, we hear it like that with this internet and this all this stuff that we have, this new technology, and it's gonna get a little more complicated in the years to come. President Lyndon B. Johnson in August 14, 1967 told Congress in a message on communication policy, he said, a telephone call from Rangoon to Jakarta must still go through Tokyo. A call from American Samoa to Tahiti goes by way of Oakland, California. Such an archaic system of international communication is no longer necessary. The communication satellite knows no geographic boundary, is dependent on no cables, owes allegiance to no single language or political philosophy. Man now has it within his power to speak directly to his fellow man in all nations. Well, President Johnson, if you would believe in nowadays, I mean, you would go like, wow, this is really, they really have advanced in communication. Okay, so in 1956, the first transatlantic telephone cable was completed in 1956, and there was no reliable means of voice communication across oceans. True, Marconi in the late 1920s was able to send wavering voice messages over 2,400 miles by bouncing shortwave radio signals off an ionized reflecting layer some kilometers above the ground because shortwave travels long distance in this manner. They're subject to atmospheric disturbances, particularly during magnetic storms from the sun. At mid-20th century, 95% of all long-distance radio communications was still conducted with shortwave transmission by means of reflection from the ionosphere. Wow. And then they came out with, by the 50s, 1950s, they had the microwave, recognized as being ideal transmission for voice and many other things. Oh, there's a picture here of 3 synchronous satellites cover the world, traveling 6,000 miles per hour in a 22,300-mile orbit. They appear to be stationary overhead. And then it says here how satellites achieve an elliptical orbit. Roches Monia satellites use elliptical orbits to cover far northern latitudes. And then there's a domestic satellite system for the 1970s. Here's in page 15 and 14 is the beginnings, and they show a real nice picture illustration on a project Apollo astronauts used communication satellite networks to keep in touch with Mission Control Center, and they have a real nice picture of it. Look at that. Look at that. Ain't that a beauty right there? See that? Yeah. I like that. I like the lunar lander. It's one of the models that they were working on, but it didn't. It turned out just about the same, but a little different. Okay. And what else do we have here? They synchronous satellites may offer collision air traffic control for transocean supersonic transports flying in stratosphere beyond radar range. Mhm. And let's see here. Ooh, there's a real nice picture of the SCORE, world's first talking satellite, blast off from Cape Canaveral, Florida, December 18, 1958. To open the age of communication satellites, SCORE carried President Eisenhower's Christmas message to the whole world. And there's a picture of it, of the satellite being rocketed out into space. Anyway, there's a lot of good things you can learn when they were first coming up with all this technology. I still remember the tallest, a 10-story house, Echo One satellite, weighed 116 pounds in orbit, successfully relayed voice and telephone signals, first satellite to do so. It was like a big balloon up in space. They came out with the low altitude satellites in the Echo One. It's a 100-foot diameter passive satellite. It's folded up in nose cone of an improved Delta launch vehicle with 400-second burn, 7,890 pound thrust. Yeah, there was a Delta space vehicle, NASA Douglas Delta space vehicle there. Here's a real nice picture that Telstar 1 launched in July the 10th, 1962, right there. See that? See? So it's a real nice little book that I picked up, and it's nice to excuse me, I got my diabetic meter telling me that my diabetic is a little high. I'll take care of that. And you got Oscar. Oscar was one of the first of a unique series of talking satellites called Oscar for orbital satellite carrying amateur radio. For you guys that are out there on the ham world, I'm sure you all know, for sure you all know about the Oscar satellites. It was launched in December the 12th, 1961 by the United States Air Force aboard a Thor Agena B rocket, riding piggyback with a military satellite, Discover 36, and for 18 days, Oscar 1 broadcast a Morse code signal. Wow. It's a hi is a greeting to amateur radio operators everywhere. And Oscar 2, another one, followed, bringing responses from 2,000 radio hams in 35 different countries. And Oscar 3 was launched on March 9, 1965, aboard another scientific satellite and carried a 2-meter transponder or transceiver to qualify also for a communication relay satellite. Oscar 4, well, there's a lot of Oscar satellites here that were sent up in those times, like Courier and Active Repeater. Those are repeater satellite. Now they have repeaters up on the mountains and the hillsides for the amateur radio to repeat their signals from one place to another, right? And on December 21st, 1965, went into a highly elliptical orbit, 101 to 20,847 miles aboard a Titan 3C USAF rocket, which at the time orbited 2 military payloads. These were LS-3, Lincoln Experimental Laboratory 3, a radio signal generator for satellite system test, and LS-4, an experimental all-solid-state satellite. The Oscar satellites, dubbed the poor man's Telstar, cost only $200 to build. Can you imagine that? Wow, enabled amateurs all over the world to converse with each other on VHF line-of-sight frequencies. And Oscar 4 was built by members of the TRW Radio Club of Redondo Beach, California. Headquarters of Project Oscar is located on the campus of Foothill, Georgia, Los Altos Hills, California. I wonder that group of people are still around. Those ham radio operators that built these little satellites. It's pretty interesting stuff. There's a Telstar was in the 1960s, and John F. Kennedy in 61. Mr. Kennedy dedicated the nation to the gigantic task of putting men on the moon, bringing them back to Earth. No, to achieving commercial supersonic flight and to bring the world closer together by curdling communication barriers with satellites all in a wide single decade. And communication, the way we have it right now, is so fast that it's got its good and it's got its bad also. It's just crazy. July 24th, 1961, President Kennedy told the nation science and technology had progressed to such a degree that communications through the use of spacelights had become possible. Ooh, imagine if he was living right now. He would have seen things like never before. There's a Telstar satellite, and then we have the Relay satellite, Relay 1. It was NASA's first repeater satellite, was launched by a Delta rocket from Cape Canaveral December 13, 1962, into a highly elliptical orbit ranging from 822 to 4,612 miles. Its orbital inclination of 47.5 degrees meant that it could pass over a ground area extending 47.5 degrees north latitude and 47.5 degrees south latitude, thus covering most of North and South America. It did, in fact, pioneer satellite communication between the two hemispheres. Interesting. Then they get into the synchroms, the first synchronous satellites. There's another original satellite by the Hughes Engineering, Thomas Hutzfa and Dr. Harold A. Rosen unveiled it atop Eiffel Tower during 1961 Paris show. That's as high as it will ever get. Like a jewel sparkling in the sky, Simcom 3 was moved into synchronous orbit over the Pacific, relayed the 1964 Olympics from Tokyo to the United States. And there's tremendous amount of information if you want to, the history of these satellites that were sent up in those years, right? Very interesting stuff. I wish I could go through the whole book, but it's okay. I gave you a little understanding of this. And there's the book. You can probably order this book uh, from eBay or Amazon. They probably have it. Probably cost you about $5-6. And again, it was copyrighted in 19 well forward in December 1968, and it was copyrighted in 1969. So it still didn't have it. Still doesn't have anything on the it's on the space shuttle or nothing like that. But it's got a bunch of satellite thing. Okay. Thank you for listening to this video. May you all have a good cold day and stay inside and stay away from all those protesting stuff. It's just causing a lot of problems, unnecessary things around the nation. There's better things to do than just being out there and just destroying this beautiful country. That's what's going on right now. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Laters.